People always talk about chosen family like it's the highest form of friendship. They never tell you that family, even chosen, can still turn into a tribunal, a place where love quietly turns into judgment. My name is Denise Rhines, and I'm 29 years old. For almost a decade, I was the glue in a group of 8 people who once swore we'd never lose touch. We met in college, a loud, chaotic mix of personalities that made sense only when we were together. We called ourselves the Circle, half as a joke, half as a promise. There was Eli, my boyfriend of 3 years. Charismatic, always the center of attention. The kind of man who could make everyone feel special until they realized they were just part of his audience. Then Hannah, my best friend since freshman year, bright, ambitious, the type who made color-coded lists for her life goals and believed everything had spiritual meaning. And the others, Lara, Ben, Maya, Tyler, and June. All of us intertwined by memories, late-night ramen, shared heartbreaks, and the illusion that our friendship was unbreakable. I used to think I was lucky. I was the one people trusted, the listener, the planner, the quiet one who always remembered birthdays and packed extra snacks on road trips. When things went wrong, I smoothed them over. When the group fractured, I stitched it back together. That was my role, the peacekeeper. But the thing about always being the glue, eventually everyone forgets you're part of what's holding them together. It started small, jokes that didn't feel like jokes. Eli once teased, "You're the mom of the group, Denise. Reliable, responsible, a little too predictable." Everyone laughed. And I did too, because that's what you do when you're the joke. But later, the laughter started to sound like agreement. Hannah began talking differently. She'd read those pastel-covered self-help books about vibrations and alignment. She'd tell me, "You're too comfortable, Denise. You're not pushing yourself." I remember asking her once, pushing myself toward what? She smiled, that soft, superior smile. Toward growth. I didn't know content could become another word for boring. But apparently it can if you say it with enough conviction. By the time I noticed Eli and Hannah spending more time together, it didn't feel suspicious. It felt inevitable. They both spoke the same new language about evolution, energy, higher paths. Sometimes Eli would start a sentence with Hannah and I were just talking about you, and end it with unsolicited advice about how I needed to rebrand my life. Every time a little part of me went quiet. Every time I felt myself shrinking to fit the version of me they approved of. Still, I told myself it was fine. We were friends. We'd been through everything together, graduation breakups, late-night emergencies, even an apartment fire once. Surely that counted for something. It didn't. That Friday night, Eli texted, "Can you come a bit early tonight? Just want to talk before everyone gets here." I didn't think much of it. He did that sometimes to vent about work or ask me to pick up snacks on my way. I stopped by a corner store, grabbed a few drinks, and walked up to his apartment humming along to music. The building smelled like warm dust and burnt coffee, too ordinary to feel like the scene of an execution. When I opened the door, I froze. It wasn't just Eli. Hannah was there. So were Lara, Ben, and Maya, all sitting neatly on the couch, hands folded, faces caught between polite smiles and guilt. Too many shoes by the door, too much silence. "Hey," I said slowly, setting the drinks down. "What's going on?" Eli stood up, his tone rehearsed calm like a manager about to deliver a performance review. "Denise, can you sit down for a sec?" I didn't. I just stared at him. "Is something wrong?" He looked at Hannah, then back at me. "This is going to sound weird," he started, "but the group's been talking about you. About us." "Us," I repeated. "As in, my relationship." He nodded. Hannah's eyes were glossy, but steady. "It's not what you think," she said softly. We've noticed some things, and it's hard to ignore." Eli jumped in. "We care about you, Denise. You've been in the same place for a while now. Same job, same apartment, same everything. You're not really challenging yourself. Hannah's growing, she's evolving, and you're kind of staying the same." That word evolving made my stomach twist. I wanted to laugh, or scream, or both. "Are you serious?" I asked. Eli held up his hands like he was explaining something logical. "It's not an attack. We just think maybe Hannah deserves someone who's on her wavelength right now." And then Hannah said it. Flat, quiet, final. "The group thinks I can do better." The words didn't make sense. The group thinks I looked around. Ben staring at the floor. Lara's lip trembling. Maya looking like she wanted to disappear. Not one of them spoke up. "You all voted?" I asked. No one answered. Eli's silence was confirmation enough. Hannah's voice broke. It's not personal, Denise. We just don't feel aligned anymore. We all want more for you. I laughed, but it sounded wrong. You all want more for me, by deciding I'm not enough. Eli sighed. Denise, come on. It's just where everyone's at. You're not keeping up with the kind of growth we're all chasing. Growth, alignment, evolution. Their words sounded like a sermon. I looked at them. These people I had fed, driven home drunk, comforted through heartbreak, stayed up nights to help study, defended to others, and realized they'd turned into strangers holding a meeting about my worth. My voice shook, but not from tears. Let me get this straight. You all discussed my relationship, voted, and decided my boyfriend can do better. No one said anything. Finally, I nodded. Well, I guess the vote's unanimous then. Eli frowned. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm out. I grabbed my jacket, walked to the door, and looked back at them one last time, this self-proclaimed council of growth. You guys always needed a project, I said quietly. Congratulations. You just lost the only one who kept it together. And then I left. No screaming, no theatrics. Just the click of the door behind me and the faint murmur of Eli's voice as I walked down the hall. She'll thank us later. Maybe I will, I thought, but not for the reason they think. Because peace isn't given. It's what's left when everything fake burns away. Silence has a sound. It's not quiet exactly, more like the ringing that follows an explosion. That's what the first few weeks felt like after that night. No texts, no calls. The group chat that once pinged nonstop memes, dinner plans, who's bringing ice went dead. For a few days I kept checking, convinced it was just temporary. Then one morning I opened my phone and saw it. You've been removed from the circle. Just like that years of friendship deleted with a tap. I stared at the screen for a long time, my coffee going cold. The name they once joked about, our family name, erased me, like I'd never been there. It shouldn't have hurt that much, but it did. The hardest part wasn't losing Eli. It was losing the noise. The constant messages, the half-arguments, the late-night group calls, they'd been the heartbeat of my life. And when it stopped, I didn't realize how addicted I'd been to the static. For days, I wandered around my apartment like a ghost, the same apartment they used to fill with laughter and chaos. Eli's mug still sat in my kitchen sink. Hannah's sweater was draped over the couch from the last time she'd cried there over something small, something I'd stayed up comforting her for. Now the silence wrapped around me like fog. I tried to convince myself I was fine. I went to work. I smiled at colleagues. I said I'm just tired when people asked if I was okay. But when I came home, the walls felt like they were breathing, waiting for a voice that wasn't coming back. After a week, I deleted all our old photos. Then I emptied the fridge, rearranged the furniture, threw away Eli's forgotten things. But there are ghosts that live in gestures, not objects. The way my hand reached for my phone to text, "We're out of milk." The way I set 2 plates instead of 1 when I cooked. The way my playlists sounded wrong without the people they once scored. That's the thing about being the steady one. When you break, it's quiet. No one hears the sound. Then one night, about a month later, I went for a drive. No destination, just the need to move. The city lights blurred in the windshield rain, streaking down like tear tracks. Without meaning to, I ended up near the old marina. It was empty, the smell of salt and rust thick in the air. I parked and sat there for a while, watching the water slap against the docks. My dad used to bring me here when I was a kid. We didn't have much, but sometimes we'd sit by the edge with sandwiches watching the boats sway in rhythm. He'd say, "See how they rock, but never fall." That's what peace looks like, Denise, not stillness, balance. I hadn't thought about that in years, but sitting there that night soaked in rain and headlights, I understood him. Peace wasn't the absence of storms. It was surviving them without capsizing. The next morning, I stopped checking my phone entirely. The group's absence stopped feeling like a wound and started feeling like space, wide, unfamiliar, but mine. I began small, waking up early, opening the windows, making breakfast for one without feeling sad about it. I deleted social media apps. I took long walks by the waterfront, sometimes barefoot, just to remember what the world felt like when it wasn't filtered through someone else's expectations. And slowly the ringing quiet began to turn into real quiet, not loneliness, freedom. It hit me one night, sitting cross-legged on my living room floor, surrounded by moving boxes I hadn't touched in years. All that time, I'd built my life like a group project. Every decision ran through a silent committee. Will they like this? Will this fit the group dynamic? Will I still belong if I change? Now, for the first time, there was no committee, no vote, just me. It was terrifying and exhilarating. Still, some nights, memories crept back. The laughter, the warmth, the false sense of safety. And sometimes I'd whisper to the dark, did I really mean that little to them? The silence never answered, but somehow that was enough. A few weeks later, I drove to the marina again, this time with purpose. The same boats were there, bobbing softly in the tide, patient and unbothered. And that's when the idea came, gentle but firm. What if I stopped trying to rebuild the old life entirely? What if I just left, not out of revenge, not to prove anything, just to start again alone on purpose? That night, I couldn't sleep. The thought kept looping through my head like a tide coming in. Every room I looked at, every object I'd bought, every photo frame on the shelf, all of it belonged to a version of me who lived for others, who waited for permission to change. Maybe it was time to find out who I could be without the vote, without the group, without the noise. That thought didn't feel sad. It felt like oxygen. I didn't know it yet, but I was already halfway gone. Halfway to the woman, I would become the one who would sail out on a small boat named Driftwood, leaving behind everything that once defined her. And as I stared at the moonlit water, I said quietly to myself, let them evolve, I'll move. You don't realize how heavy a life is until you start packing it into boxes. Every drawer I opened felt like peeling back a layer of who I used to be. Receipts from old trips, birthday cards, signed by people who no longer spoke to me. Photos of smiling faces frozen in lies they hadn't told yet. I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was tired of being the background character in my own story. So one morning, I did something simple, radical, only in its finality. I opened my laptop and typed, use sailboat for sale. The idea had started as a whisper at the marina, but the whisper had grown teeth. It wasn't escapism, it was reclamation. When you spend your life orbiting others, stillness can feel like rebellion. But movement, even aimless movement, feels like truth. A week later, I stood on the dock again, wind tangling my hair, the smell of salt and engine oil wrapping around me. The broker's voice was distant as he gestured toward her. She's small but sturdy. Been through a few storms. He was talking about the boat, but it felt like he was describing me. The hull was white with a strip of faded blue paint. Teak trim along the sides, weathered but beautiful. Inside, a cramped little cabin with just enough space for a bed, a tiny stove, and a coffee pot. When I ran my hand along the railing, splinters pricked my skin proof. She wasn't perfect, just real. I bought her that same day. No hesitation, no approval needed, just a signed check and a deep trembling breath. I named her Driftwood, because driftwood used to be part of something whole until the sea reshaped it, discarded, softened, free. It felt like a name I could grow into. The first night on Driftwood, the marina lights shimmered across the water like broken glass. The air smelled of salt and rain. I sat on deck, wrapped in an old blanket, drinking cheap wine from a chipped mug, listening to the creak of the ropes as the boat rocked gently. And somewhere between the hum of the water and the whisper of the wind, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, quiet. Not the kind of quiet that follows rejection, the kind that feels earned. I didn't think about Eli, or Hannah, or the group chat that used to dictate my weeks. For the first time in forever, I didn't need to be anyone's piece. I was my own. Days became weeks. I learned how to live small, how to measure time by tides instead of notifications. Mornings started with instant coffee on deck, watching sunlight drip across the water. Afternoons were for fixing things I'd never touched before, patching leaks, cleaning filters, oiling wood. Every screw I tightened, every rope I learned to tie, was a quiet middle finger to the people who'd once called me stagnant. At night, I'd read by lantern light my dad's old sailing manual, open on my knees. His handwriting still filled the margins. Always respect the wind. Never fight the current, use it. He'd never imagined I'd take those notes this literally, but maybe he would have been proud. The funny thing about peace is that it's both beautiful and dangerous. It strips away noise, but also excuses. There's no one left to blame for your unhappiness, no one to fix it for you. You either drown in the silence or you learn to float. For me, floating became survival. Each morning I woke up to the smell of diesel and sea salt, the deck shimmering with dew. The first few times I sailed beyond the marina, I was terrified. The wind was strong, the horizon endless. But fear is different when you have no audience. It stops being humiliation and starts being proof you're alive. One evening, I anchored near a small inlet where the water turned gold under the setting sun. Seagulls wheeled overhead. My hair was tangled, my hands blistered. My skin sunburned, but my heart was steady. I hadn't checked my phone in days, maybe weeks. And for once, I didn't care what anyone thought of me. No metrics, no votes, just rhythm and breath and sea. I thought about them sometimes. About Hannah with her endless affirmations and moral superiority. About Eli with his charm and hollow empathy. About how the group used to look at me like a safe harbor and how they abandoned me when they wanted to chase storms. It used to hurt. Now it just didn't. You can't mourn people who were never really with you, only beside you. As driftwood rocked gently under the moonlight, I whispered to the waves, "You all wanted growth. Well, this is mine." For the first time, I meant it. That night, I slept without dreams. When I woke up, I made coffee, climbed onto the deck, and watched the morning mist peel away from the sea. Somewhere behind me, my old life continued. Group dinners, filtered smiles, captions about energy. But I wasn't in that world anymore. And for the first time, that felt like freedom, not loss. Still, as the horizon glowed pink and gold, I felt something shift, a strange, subtle instinct. That kind of peace doesn't last forever. It's too pure, too quiet. And peace, I would soon learn, has a way of calling the past back to test whether you've really earned it. It was almost 3 months before my old life tried to find me again. By then, Driftwood had become more than a boat. She was a companion, a confession, a moving home that asked for nothing but care. Every surface bore traces of me, now scratches from tools, pages of notes taped near the wheel, salt rings from tea mugs I forgot to wash. My hands were rougher, my hair tangled by wind and sun. But when I looked in the mirror, nailed beside the cabin door, I saw something I hadn't seen in years, stillness that wasn't forced. Then one night, while I was cooking instant noodles over a small camping stove, my phone buzzed an unfamiliar sound in a life that no longer depended on it. The name on the screen made my stomach tighten. Ben, quiet Ben. The one who never picked sides. The one who always deflected with a joke. His message was short, 5 words that landed like a stone in calm water. "You were right to leave." I stared at it for a long time, steam rising from my half-cooked noodles. No context, no greeting. Just that. I typed back before I could stop myself. "What happened?" He didn't reply right away. The minutes stretched into an hour. The tide shifted. Then finally, the group's falling apart. Eli's different now. Hannah's not doing great. Guess the universe didn't align like they thought. A hollow laugh slipped out before I could help it. I could almost hear the irony echoing across the water. They wanted evolution. They got entropy instead. I hadn't looked at social media in months, but curiosity is a stubborn parasite. Later that night, I turned on my old phone and scrolled through their pages, the glow of the screen reflecting off the waves. The soul family aesthetic was gone. No dinner photos, no group selfies, no captions about vibrational alignment. The last post from their circle was over a month old, a picture of Hannah at some retreat. Eyes closed, hands in prayer pose. Caption: "Learning to trust the universe again." The comments were sparse. Ben's usual jokes, gone. Maya's supportive emojis, missing. Even Eli hadn't liked it. Then I checked his profile. Eli had new friends now, work acquaintances mostly. His captions sounded eerily familiar, recycled from Hannah's old mantras. Not everyone deserves your energy. Sometimes growth means leaving others behind. He was using her words, her tone, even her hashtags. And for the first time, I realized they hadn't been growing. They'd just been imitating each other, the internet, whatever version of self-help fit their latest identity crisis. Without me, the group had no center, no planner, no peacekeeper, no one to balance the chaos. They'd mistaken my stability for weakness, but it had been the glue all along. I closed the app, tossed the phone aside, and leaned back against the wooden mast. The waves lapped softly against Driftwood's hull, steady and unbothered. It didn't feel like vindication, it felt like closure. But peace, even quiet peace, is never absolute. About a week later, my phone buzzed again, this time with a number I knew by heart. Hannah. I didn't answer. It stopped ringing after a few seconds, then rang again, and finally a message. "Denise, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to say I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that night. I let people get in my head." My hand hovered over the screen. Her words looked sincere, but sincerity means nothing when it comes too late. I didn't reply. She messaged again 2 days later. Everything fell apart. The group's gone. Eli turned out to be a hypocrite. I can't believe how fake everyone was. Can we talk, please? I set the phone down and stared at the horizon. The sea was silver blue, the kind of color that makes you forget the world existed before it. Her desperation felt like static trying to interrupt a song I'd finally learned to hear. Then came another message. He's dating Lara now. That one made me laugh, not cruelly, but quietly, like someone who's seen the ending of a movie everyone else still thinks is suspenseful. 2 weeks. That's all it took for Eli to move on to the next person in his aligned orbit. It's not funny, she texted. You're right, I typed back. It's poetic. She didn't reply for a while. When she did, it was just 3 words. I miss you. I read them twice. Then a third time. Not out of longing, but curiosity. Did she miss me? Or did she miss the way I steadied her world? I typed one sentence. Peaceful's expensive. Then I turned off the phone. Let it sink into the drawer beside my bed where old pain belonged. For the next few weeks, I didn't hear from anyone again. The marina became my rhythm. Morning coffee sunlight, bleeding through mist gulls circling above like slow-moving thoughts. Ben sent one last message, a single line. Guess they voted themselves out this time. And maybe that was the truest thing anyone had said in months. Because that's the thing about people who claim to outgrow others. They rarely realize they're pruning their own roots. The circle had withered without me, not because I was special, but because I was the only one who cared to hold them together. Now, as driftwood swayed gently beneath a rising moon, I whispered to the sea. They said I wasn't evolving. Turns out I just evolved where they couldn't follow. I thought that was the end. But stories, real stories, never end where you think they do. Because peace, once tested, demands proof. And the proof was about to arrive, standing on the dock months later, under the same sky that had once seen me leave. It was late autumn when the past finally found the courage to face me. The sea had turned steel gray, and the air was heavy with the scent of rain. I was docked near a quiet coastal town, a place so small it didn't even have streetlights by the marina. The kind of place where no one asked questions, just nodded when you passed. That evening, I was mending a torn sail, humming softly to myself when I heard a voice calling my name. Familiar, hesitant, breaking on the second syllable. Denise. For a moment, I thought I imagined it. Then I turned, and there she was, Hannah. She looked like a ghost of her old self. Hair shorter, unevenly cut, skin pale. The radiant confidence she once wore like armor had drained away, leaving a kind of fragile stillness in its place. Her eyes darted around, as if expecting me to disappear. Hey, she said softly, hands stuffed into her jacket pockets. You look different. So do you, I answered. We stood there, the sound of the tide filling the space between us. She shifted from foot to foot like a child rehearsing an apology she didn't know how to give. I know you probably don't want to see me, she started. I didn't respond, so she kept going. But I had to. I've been replaying that night over and over, and You voted, I said quietly. Her breath caught. Denise, I didn't mean for it to go like that. You said I wasn't aligned with your energy. I said, my voice calm, almost gentle. You said you could do better. She winced. I know. God, I know how awful that sounds now. Eli twisted everything. He made it sound like you were holding me back. I believed him. Because it was easier than admitting you were unhappy, I replied. She looked down, tears threatening to spill. He made me feel like I had to outgrow you to matter. And then he moved on to Lara. 2 weeks later, I nodded. Poetic, isn't it? She let out a bitter laugh, the sound of someone choking on their own lesson. I thought I was so enlightened, she said. But I was just selfish and scared. Her voice cracked. I lost everything, Denise. The group's gone. Eli ruined what was left. And I don't even recognize myself anymore. You wanted evolution, I said softly. You got it, just not the kind you imagined. We fell silent again. Rain began to fall in light, deliberate drops, blurring the world into gray and silver. She stepped closer, her shoes squeaking on the dock. I miss you, she whispered. You were the only one who made things feel safe. I looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time, I saw her not as the girl who betrayed me, but as a mirror I'd already stepped past. Everything she was, I used to be constantly adjusting to make others comfortable, confusing control for care calling, fear growth. You don't miss me, I said finally. You miss the version of yourself that existed when I was around. She blinked confused. What do you mean? You liked having me as your calm, I said, because it made your chaos feel meaningful. Without me, you had to face what you really are when no one's holding you steady. She stared at me, trembling. That's not fair. Neither was the vote, I said gently. But maybe this is balance. Hannah's shoulders sagged. The rain picked up, tapping the dock like impatient fingers. She wiped her face and tried to smile. Do you hate me? I thought about that for a long moment. About all the sleepless nights, the silent phone, the ache of being erased. Then I shook my head. No, I don't hate you. I just don't need you anymore. Something in her broke at that. Her mouth opened like she wanted to argue, but no words came. I just wanted to say sorry, she whispered finally, for all of it. I know, I said, and for what it's worth, I forgive you. Her eyes widened. You do? I smiled faintly. Forgiving isn't the same as returning. She looked like she wanted to say more, but I stepped back toward the boat. The rain had soaked through my jacket. My hair clung to my face. Behind me, the waves slapped softly against the dock, as if punctuating every truth we'd left unsaid. I climbed onto driftwood, turned toward her one last time, and said quietly, You all voted. I just followed your decision and went somewhere better. She stood there crying silently, her silhouette blurred by rain and distance. For a moment, I almost reached out. Then I remembered that peace, real peace, doesn't come with rescue missions. I started the engine. The low hum filled the air, grounding me. As the boat drifted away from the dock, I looked back once, just long enough to see her shrinking in the mist. Not as an enemy, not even as a friend, just as someone who once taught me what I would never be again. That night I made tea on the deck. The sea was calm, the air sharp with salt. I raised the mug toward the horizon and whispered not out of anger, but clarity. Peaceful's expensive, but I've finally paid in full. The wind carried the words away, scattering them across the water like ashes of an old life finally burned clean. I didn't see Hannah again after that night on the dock. She left without another word, a soaked, trembling shadow swallowed by the fog. And when her footsteps faded, it was as if the world exhaled. I went back to my cabin, wrapped myself in a blanket that smelled of salt and old wood, and felt a quiet finality settle in my chest. For the first time, her absence didn't ache. It simply was. Weeks passed. The season shifted, the water darkened, and the mornings came with that faint bite of winter. Driftwood creaked and hummed beneath me, like a living thing, and I started to think of her less as a boat and more as a witness. She'd seen me unravel and rebuild. She knew the weight of every silence, the texture of every wound that had turned into wisdom. Most evenings I anchored near the edge of the bay, watching the sun melt into the horizon, colors bleeding into each other like forgiveness and grief sharing the same sky. I'd light a lantern, make tea, and write. Not letters, not diaries, just sentences that began as memories and ended as truths. They called me stagnant, but maybe stillness was just my way of listening. They voted to grow apart. I learned to grow within. I didn't plan to publish them or even keep them, but the act of writing felt like reclaiming the language they'd stolen. Words like peace, alignment, growth. Words they'd used to hurt me now belonged to me again. One night I received a message from Ben, a photo this time, a small cafe table, 2 cups of coffee, and a caption. Ran into Hannah. She's moving out of town. Said you were the only real one. I stared at the photo until my eyes blurred. Then I turned off my phone and put it face down on the counter. I didn't feel sadness, just the strange serenity of knowing that closure had already happened, even if she was still chasing it. Because sometimes the most merciful thing you can give someone is distance. Let them wrestle with their own echoes until they understand the silence you left behind. As winter deepened, I decided to take driftwood farther south. There was a small island port I'd always wanted to see, a place my father once mentioned when I was little, back when life still felt big and forgiving. He used to say, that's where the water stops feeling like a barrier and starts feeling like home. So I set sail before dawn one morning, mist curling around me like breath. The engine rumbled softly, the ropes groaned, and the sea stretched ahead, open, endless, forgiving. Halfway through the journey, the wind shifted. Not violently, just enough to test my balance. And for a brief, trembling second, I thought, this is what peace feels like when it's tested. Not calm, not chaos, just control without fear. I adjusted the sails and smiled. I wasn't running from ghosts anymore. I was sailing toward the person I had become because of them. That night, anchored near the island, I sat on deck beneath a sky so clear it almost looked new. The stars reflected on the water, 1,000 tiny mirrors, reminding me of everything I'd survived. The pain, the humiliation, the loneliness. All of it had distilled into something quiet and strong. I thought of Hannah then, of Eli, of every person who had spoken my worth like it was theirs to decide. And instead of anger, I felt gratitude, because their rejection had been the fire that forged my stillness. They burned the bridge I'd been too kind to cross, and on the other side of that fire I found myself. I poured another cup of tea and whispered into the wind. You all wanted to evolve, I just learned to breathe. Driftwood rocked gently beneath me, and I closed my eyes, letting the rhythm carry me. Maybe one day I'd dock somewhere for good. Maybe I wouldn't. But I knew this much: I'd never again shrink to fit someone else's version of growth. Because peace isn't a destination. It's the moment you stop asking for permission to exist. And as the sea breathed around me, I realized I wasn't alone anymore. I was whole. Dawn came soft and slow, like the world had decided to start over. The horizon stretched open in shades of gold and rose, and driftwood rocked gently patient as always. I stood barefoot on deck, a mug of coffee warming my hands, breathing in the scent of salt metal and new beginnings. The sea was glass that morning. No wind, no rush, just reflection. And for a long time I stared at it, realizing that it wasn't just showing me the sky. It was showing me myself. Not the woman they once judged, not the version I twisted myself into to be loved, but the person who survived all of it, quiet, steady, unshaken. I used to think revenge was about making them see what they'd lost. Now I know the real revenge is peace they can't disturb anymore. Because silence is deafening when you've spent your life screaming for attention. And freedom tastes sharpest to the ones who once lived on approval. I heard through Ben one last message before he deleted social media entirely that Eli had broken up with Laura. Apparently he'd found someone more aligned. Of course he had. People like him always move the goalpost so they never have to admit they're the problem. As for Hannah, she left the city. No grand post, no apology tour, just gone. Ben said she was taking a job somewhere up north near the woods, trying to start over, he wrote, like you did. But that wasn't true. She was trying to forget. There's a difference. Starting over means facing yourself. Forgetting just means delaying the reckoning. Later that afternoon, as I sat writing in my journal, I found myself sketching the 8 of us, as we used to be: messy, bright, naive. All smiles, hands, tangled faces tilted toward laughter that now felt fictional. And I realized something I hadn't before. We were never really family. We were therapy for each other's loneliness, borrowed comfort that only worked as long as no one healed too fast. When I stopped being broken in the way they needed me to be, they didn't know what to do with me anymore, so they voted me out. And that's okay, because I learned to stop asking people who benefit from your silence to teach you peace. That night I sailed again, not far, just enough to watch the coastline fade. The stars shimmered across the water like scattered glass. The sound of the engine hummed like a heartbeat beneath my feet. I thought about my father, his voice from years ago. You can't stop waves, Denise. You just learn which ones are worth riding. Maybe that was all this ever was: not a tragedy, not even a betrayal, just the wave that taught me how to sail alone. As the moon rose higher, I set my journal down and whispered the words that had once belonged to Eli, to Hannah, to all of them, but now finally belonged only to me. Not everyone deserves your energy. Sometimes growth means leaving others behind. They had used those lines to justify cruelty, but on my lips they felt different. Not excuses, boundaries, not superiority, peace. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of pine from the distant shore. I took one last look at the horizon and smiled. They said I wasn't evolving, I murmured. Turns out I just evolved where they couldn't follow. Driftwood swayed as if she understood. The sea, vast and endless, opened before me, not as an escape, but as proof. Because I wasn't running anymore, I was arriving. The lantern flickered, the tide sighed, and for the first time in a long, long while, I whispered, not to anyone, but to the quiet itself, "Thank you."